Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I think most people have their cameras and mics off, which is okay.
It's early in the morning. I'm in Queensland, so it's only 8 o'clock here, so I totally get it.
Yeah. We can jump in. Should we go ahead and get started? For sake of time, I'm going to share my screen. We are recording today's session. You are welcome to use the chat features and things like that. If you want to turn on your camera, I believe you'll be able to, but no pressure to do that with the recording either. So welcome to Kameleon's free webinar on becoming a registered behavior support practitioner. Tracey and I run this webinar every year, and it's one of our favorite ones. Love getting to pass on some free career advice to people interested in the PBS space and get them excited about what this world can look like. Before we get too started, I do want to begin with an acknowledgement of country. I am on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Melbourne. Tracey, I'll let you do yours as well.
And I'm on Bundjalung Nation, so Wangibera people of the Gold Coast hinterland.
And we respect the elders past, present, and emerging, and extend the welcome to any First Nations people here with us this morning. So today we're going to go through some brief introductions for ourselves, learn a little bit about who you guys are, define what positive behavior support is in the NDIS context, really try to convince you why to go down the PBS route, what's so exciting about it and fantastic and rewarding. We'll walk you through the different types of registrations. This is both with the NDIS and then also the ABA credentials. Walk you through how to get that registration, what to look for in an employer with that, and how to prepare for the role. So to start, I am Rachel Bartlett. I am a BCBA and a behavior support practitioner. I'm the clinical director here at Kameleon for Victoria, Tasmania, and Western Australia, and here with the wonderful Tracey Lawson.
Just a few states that you cover there, Rachel. I'm Tracey Lawson, managing partner of Kameleon Group. And yeah, super excited. This is the best job in the whole world, being a PBS practitioner. So that's why Rachel and I do this every year. We're hoping to entice more and more good people to do PBS.
Yes. So next, we'd love to learn a little bit about who's with us. That helps us kind of cater the conversation to different things. So I am going to launch a quick poll. If you can answer that. I've tried to cover some broad options, but there is another category if you really want to type in the chat and tell us what that looks like for you. I'll give everyone a few moments to answer that. We've got like 80% of all the people who've answered so far, 83 current ABA students. So wonderful. So you guys are probably doing your master's. My guess is Monash or Griffith. But happy if anyone else is somewhere else. And a few people with psychology backgrounds or other. So a good mix of everything. Thank you, guys. Yeah, just helpful for us to give some advice and cater the conversation that way. And to answer the question in the chat as well, the recording will upload to our website and YouTube channel. So you should be able to access it that way. So jumping into what is positive behavior support and why should you consider a role in this space, especially for those of you who are doing the difficult masters of applied behavior analysis and you're learning all this fantastic behavior science and you're like, okay, what do I do with this now in Australia? Hopefully Tracey and I can convince you to consider the PBS route. On the screen, I have the definition of how NDIS describes positive behavior support, highlighting some of those keywords around an evidence-based, value and rights-based approach, really focusing on improving a person's quality of life and understanding why a behavior happens. So those of you who are doing, again, a behavior science background, functional assessment's a big key part of this and really understanding the person. And then making sure a behavior support plan's developed is kind of an output of that as well. That's how it's defined, on the NDIS website. If you go into the capability framework, which will be your best friend as you go through the registration process, outlines the BSP process as process of assessment, intervention, and database decision-making. Again, those of you who are studying psychology or behavior science, those are familiar terms to you. I'm sure you've done whole units on each of those things. So very applicable in that way. And then continues to focus on skill building, creating supportive context, and trying to reduce the impact and likelihood of behaviors of concern. It's person-centered and evidence-informed strategies. This is the updated capability frameworks. They updated it in, I feel like 2024 was still last year, but apparently 2 years ago. And it draws primarily from behavioral. So I've underlined that, just trying to again show you that you're well positioned to go into a career as this, as well as educational and social sciences. Interesting enough, before 2024, the definition in the capability framework in 2019 and 2021 actually outlined that positive behavior support was the clinical framework of applied behavior analysis. So they've updated it to be a little bit more broad, which I think matches the context. My main takeaway here for you is if you understand behavior science, if you understand behavior analysis, you're well positioned to understand positive behavior support. Any thoughts or additions on that, Tracey?
No, it is. It's a great way to use the science in a practical way, and as we all know, that there's a bit of bad rap about behavioural science in the past, and this is one way to kind of flip that and to ensure that we're still using that foundational science that we've worked so hard to learn, but we're really applying that in a person-centred way to really increase a person's quality of life. And it is the best way to use all that hard work that you've done.
Lovely. So yeah, as Tracey and I are both saying, it's an exciting application of behavior science is what behavior support really is at the heart of it. And we're quite passionate about it in that space. Hopefully that's coming through early Monday morning. So why positive behavior support? I really hope you can understand that it's a lot more than just writing long behavior support plans. I know for a while I was hesitant to jump in because I thought that's all that it was. And that's, for a lot of people, the least exciting part of the job. Some people really love it. And really focusing on how you can use that science in that values-driven way. So really focusing, again, on socially significant outcomes, what can improve this person's quality of life, and how can we make environmental changes to support that change and that quality of life improvement. And again, your behavior analysis training, especially when you combine it with like the ethics pieces and the social significance, can really prepare you to be a behavior support practitioner. Any questions or anything so far, feel free to use the chat or hop in. Love to answer any questions anyone has about those things. Next, we're going to walk through different types of registration. So since we do have a lot of ABA students, I think it is relevant for us to go through what the BCBA credential looks like, what the CBA credential looks like, and then also obviously the NDIS Behavior Support Practitioner pathway. So we're going to walk through all three of those. There is a little bit of sadness, kind of hurts my heart that the BACB is leaving Australia in full transparency. So we're kind of in a situation where if you're not certified by the 1st of January next year, you don't have the opportunity to do so. So in order to meet those hours, really, if you haven't started collecting fieldwork hours, it's probably too late with that math. It often takes at least 12 months of a concentrated, and I think a little bit closer to 1.5 years, 2 years. Slower. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker because if you haven't started it already, then it's not as relevant to you, I suppose. The way this looks like for the BACB is you get a degree from an accredited program. Again, Monash and Griffith meet these qualifications. They've kept up with all of that. And then you do supervised field work. These can happen alongside each other. So again, even if as students, you guys might have already started those hours, and that's great. You do need 2,000 hours or what they call 1,500 concentrated. Either 5% of those hours each month need to be supervised. If you're doing the concentrated pathway, it needs to be 10%. So that is a decent amount of supervision each month. The maximum hours you can receive is 130. So 10% of that is 13 hours a month of supervision. So it is a quite big undertaking. And then you need observations and contacts with your supervisor. Once you meet all of that, you put your paperwork together and ask to sit for a board exam, and then you sit the board exam, and then you're certified and can keep that up and renew that every 2 years. But again, if you kind of haven't started this journey, unfortunately, with the deadlines and such, it's quite hard to reach. I think it might be impossible now to reach the 2,000, 1,500. So sorry for that one. So we'll focus a little bit more on the CBA options next. First, sorry, I forgot I had this slide. I wanted to just highlight the activities that the BACB wants you to do for fieldwork hours. If you look at these dot points down here, it's all PBS. It's observations, it's data collection, it's training people, conducting assessments, graphing and analysis, and writing programs and plans in that way. So if you are in a PBS role and doing those hours, it's quite easy for the work you're doing to meet these expectations. So focusing next on the Certified Behavior Analyst pathway, this is with the Association for Behavior Analysis Australia, or ABAA. So this is essentially the Australian version of the BCBA. It does not have a board exam at this time, so it's kind of a decent time to jump in and become one. I believe they're in development for that. In order to do this, you need to have a degree in behavior analytic coursework. So again, your Griffith or Monash degrees, and then you get 1,500 hours of supervised experience, and then you submit that for certification. So very similar process to the BACB, just without the board exam. Again, the criteria for what that looks like, the different hours of that, look at functional behavior assessments, writing behavior support plans, monitoring progression, training stakeholders, working with clients, and program development. All of that you do in the PBS role. So I guess the main takeaway I want you to have here is that there's options for you. If you've studied behavior science or ABA at the master's level, you take an entry-level PBS role. All of that work you're doing during that time can work towards your credential of becoming a certified behavior analyst, so CBA, or they also have a professional membership, which is about 1,000 hours of this. So maybe for those psych or teacher backgrounds with us here today, and you're like, oh, I don't have the master's, there's the professional membership option as well. 1,000 hours, I think you can get, and again, about a year of experience, and then you kind of have that credential to match alongside the NDIS. Anything to add on that, Tracey?
No, it's perfect. It's great.
Beautiful. Again, ask any questions in the chat if it comes up. I know it can be a bit confusing as you're going through the master's. No one kind of sits you down and tells you which options to take and what might suit you. Yep. Okay. So Alexander, you're doing a graduate certificate. That might apply in similar ways. So I think they also have a bachelor's level. So there might be something in between, or if you go on to take that graduate certificate to the master's. So it could be worth looking possibly at the professional membership first and then seeing if you can go down the CBA route. A lot of it has to be what fits your personal goals. We'll kind of jump into the NDIS space next, but there is a bit of a disconnect, might not be the right word, but being a CBA or a BCBA doesn't necessarily make you a higher level NDIS behavior support practitioner. So going through these credentials to make it match, your master's in education is something you have to do for yourself. Tracey and I both did it and became BCBAs, and that was important to us, but some people it might not be as important, or it's not as urgent. So that might be some decisions to make for yourself in that way as well. Again, just putting those behavior analytic experiences up there, that again, just trying to really hit home the point that behavior science is positive behavior support, and positive behavior support is behavior science, and you can use those together. So this is a really viable career option for you with your education backgrounds. Now we're going to jump into the NDIS space, which I think is the harder one, hopefully, for everyone I'm expecting to wrap their heads around. There are 7 domains or principles and values that the capability framework outlines, and that's what's on the screen. So really walks through interim response to all the way from assessment to planning, intervention, and then also continuing professional development and supervision. Each of the levels that we'll talk through touches on each of these. So there's core pieces of information that you need to know, and there's also skills you need to be able to demonstrate for each of these areas. To make that a little less intimidating, again, I have mapped it with how this fits with the BACB task list and the ABAA behavior analyst competencies. So if you look at the 7 different capability responses, and then there's an extra one that's just what the ABA master's or graduate certificates add in on their own. You can see there's so much overlap. So functional behavior assessments, most of you guys, if all of you guys, probably have taken a whole unit and a whole class on functional behavior assessment and what that looks like. You're well prepared to have evidence and understanding that. Similar with things like intervention and data analysis. Where it fills in, I think, is a really important piece that I really like students to get is that the ethics code also helps fill in those gaps. So as we were saying at the beginning, it really is a values-driven science. So it's really great if we know all the content here, very valuable, but also the ethics, I think, is what puts us in a really good position to deliver these services. So walks through considerations for that, things to know, all of that. And again, this matches really well with the capability framework. ABAA does have a code of ethics. It's quite similar. It's based off of the BACB one. It's just a little bit harder to quote on a slide because they don't use a numbering system. So it's a lot of dot points. So it's hard to kind of summarize in this way. But the ethics and the ethical expectations are quite similar, which again, most of you will know from your ethics units in the masters. But that again, overlaps a lot with the NDIS PBS capability framework. Any thoughts on that one, Tracey?
No, it is a shame. Hopefully the association in Australia will actually put some more reference marks in there to make that easier, because I do think it's important, especially now that everyone here is most likely going to go down to the CBA route. And so I think ethics is just such a foundation of everything that we do, and it's good to be able to reference it. So I'm sure they will. They've got a lot to do at the moment, so I'm sure they'll get there, and it'll be a bit easier. But as you said, they're very similar.
Yeah, and there's nothing that really contradicts in either one. So yeah, the values do align underlying. So hopefully when we run this next year, there'll be reference points so we can just look at the ABAA one and we won't chat about the BACB. Fingers crossed. Lovely. So now that hopefully again I've convinced you there's overlap, you're like, okay, I'm well prepared. What does this mean? How do I navigate the NDIS? That's the big takeaway for you today. As we jump into describing the NDIS context, the NDIS, as a lot of government agencies and things do, they like to use really confusing language. So on the screen, there's a couple parties or players, I guess, in it to understand. Where it says provider is a company. So that's not an individual person. There is what an implementing provider is. So that's often support work companies. And then there's a specialist behavior support provider. So that's a company that is registered with the NDIS to deliver behavior support. And then there's the individual practitioner, which is a registered behavior support practitioner, which is what we'll walk through next on how you become that in the NDIS. It can be really confusing, especially out in the world where sometimes people are providers and they're the only practitioner that you're like, oh, this is one and the same. And that's how I saw Sally's doing it on Facebook. What does this mean? There might be separate registrations. So we're not here to teach you today how to register as a company or providers, but just getting you familiar with that language on what that means. So how do you become a practitioner registered with the NDIS? There are 4 types of practitioners. A confusing little caveat with this is the NDIS does not tell you what level you are, and they don't really recognize the levels in that way. So there is a little bit of an agreement between you and a supervisor and documentation with that. Most people, and a lot of you would be suitable to come in as a core practitioner. And this is pretty much kind of that entry-level space where you're able to deliver supports, but under supervision. You're able to develop plans, but someone has to endorse those and sign off with you. So you shouldn't be left to your own devices and alone in that core practitioner space. The company has a lot of responsibility to support you in that role.
Yeah, initially when the NDIS first came up with this, you did apply for those particular levels, and then they just didn't have the manpower to process everyone's applications, nor do they have the clinical expertise to actually assess them either. And so now it's really up to your supervisor, which is where it should be.
Yep. And then as you meet all of those knowledge and skills, as we were kind of saying, in those 7 different domains, things like annual response, functional behavior assessment, supervision, and professional development. As you meet those, you can move to proficient, and then from there you can move to specialist or advanced. There's not really a practical difference between proficient, advanced, and specialist, in the sense that at that point you can sign your own plans. You don't need that secondary signature on there. So there is that level of kind of that responsibility and independence. Because it's not monitored, you will see there's a large variety of what this means in practice. You might meet one advanced practitioner who's got 25 years of experience and all these qualifications and research, and then you meet the next one who's been in the field 18 months and had a supervisor who signed them off moving up. Not necessarily right or wrong either direction, but that's where you have to kind of be careful on what these mean out in the wild, I suppose. So we'll walk through first how you get into it, because I think that's where most of you will be coming from. The NDIS has introduced something, it used to be called the alternative pathway because it was kind of like the option B. Now I find it actually being the default option. It's what we bring most practitioners on if they're new to the space. So it is called the entry-level behavior support practitioner pathway, which I think makes sense to that. What you fill out first is an NDIS application and declaration form. It's really small on the screen, but you can find it on the NDIS as you go through it. It really is just saying, I'm an entry-level person. I'm new. I don't have all of these skills and knowledge yet. I'm agreeing to go into a relationship with this employer who has a plan to teach me all of these things and give me the experience that I need. And then a piece of that is that you understand that you will have your experience and your suitability reviewed in 12 months. So that's kind of the big tick box at the end that you're ticking. And sometimes people overlook that, but they have kind of improved their processes that the NDIS is now following up a year later, being like, okay, you've been entry level for a year. Let's see where your skills are. And we'll walk through what that looks like. So in the beginning, again, you do this application and declaration form. This is done alongside your employer because, again, that provider has a responsibility to teach you these things and what that looks like. So you do have to have a supervisor as part of it. So Charles, I can see you have that question. I have seen some people do it possibly without an employer, but they have to have an external supervisor that you're paying to do it. I think it's much harder because I actually think you provide your employment contract as part of it. Again, this is where I wanted the language around the provider to come into it, because the provider actually has a big responsibility to entry-level practitioners to support you and understanding this, giving you the experience that you need and the supervision. We do know it's hard out there in the job market. There are a lot of companies who do want core or people who are already registered. I know it can be difficult when you're really wanting a job, but I also think if they're not kind of ready to help guide you through the entry-level process, even if you are entry-level, maybe that's an answer on that it's not the right company and the right match for where your skills are at. I really can't overstate how much support entry-level people need and that the provider has a responsibility to give you. Yeah, Tracey, what are your thoughts on that?
It's really tricky, isn't it, Rachel? Because, especially for people who study behavioural science or psychology, you've done all this study and you really want to kind of jump in and use what you've learned. But there's a lot to learn to do PBS well. It's not, as Rachel said at the beginning, it's not about filling out a report. Like that's, the work starts after the report is finished, and also trying to use your clinical skills to make sure that it all is logically correlated to whatever the problem context is. It's not an easy thing. You can walk into anything being a PBS practitioner. So it is really, really important to try and look for a company that provides you good supervision and good support. Some companies might provide less billable, like client hours, to give you more supervision, you know what I mean, to kind of balance it out so you're supported well. Please, I really strongly encourage you to do that. Like, take your time. Don't go for someone that's going to give you more cash and you think it's going to be fine and then you end up getting burnt out. We've lost a lot of people, a lot of really good people in the industry kind of jumping through too quick. So please find someone that's going to be an employer that's going to be supportive and learn and take your time to learn, because it is the best job. You'll be there forever, but take your time.
Yeah, I think one of the most rewarding parts of it is how important the job is, but there is a lot of risk you're walking into when you open the whole can of worms that is restrictive practices and authorization. We're really important safeguard in that space, and protect yourself, especially those of you who have studied behavior science. You're like, okay, I have this ethics code to uphold. Don't put yourself in positions where that's going to be compromised. I will say, this is anecdotal, so you guys might be like, that's actually not the case, Rachel, out there in the job market. But I think I'm seeing more and more companies do the entry-level pathway. Not that the NDIS has made it easier with this. I think, 3 years ago, it absolutely was like people wanted a full core registration and it was really hard to do that. But it's getting a little bit easier in that space. So pretty much you do this application form, your the company you're going to work for provides your employment contract. They also give a learning plan being like, this is how we're going to teach and give the experience to this person. You practice under supervision. So you do the role in that way. That professional development plan is taught. And then around that 12-month mark, you start to put together a portfolio of evidence. You do a self-assessment, and then you get that endorsed by a supervisor. So what this looks like is how you potentially can move up the different levels at other times as well, but you have to reassess at the 12-month mark. That doesn't mean at 12 months you have to be ready to move to proficient. There's a decent amount of people who don't, and you stay at core for that time frame. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think there actually can be strength to that as well, of continuing that supervision requirement at that stage. Because sometimes your caseload hasn't allowed you to have the experience to be proficient. So a lot of that can be around restrictive practices. If you haven't had to write plans with restrictive practices or have ones with like registered providers and things like that, you might not have that experience yet. And that's okay.
There's just a few questions that I thought I might just answer quickly.
Yeah.
Charles is asking, can you register without the employer part if you're currently job hunting? No, you can't be a registered behaviour support practitioner unless you're working with a registered provider for behaviour support. Like that is, you won't get your number unless you are. Your only other choice is to start up your own company, but that's a whole nother thing. So you do need to find an entry-level role. Alexander, lots of companies want someone that is at core. That they may, but there are companies out there that do take on entry level. So, we just want to encourage you to kind of keep looking. And this is happening more and more. I think, as Rachel said, the NDS is making that a bit easier. And Katie, if you're wanting to get your 1,500 hours of CBA, doing this PBS framework, would I need to sign on with a BCBA or a CBA supervisor that's within my company, or can I sign with an employer who is able to take me through the core requirements? I think I know what you mean. Are you talking about external supervision? You can get external supervision to sign off on your 1,500 hours, if that's what you mean. Do you have anything else, Rachel?
Yeah, I think from my understanding as well there, I think the quick answer is ideally you can do both at the same time. So you want to find, and I think it works well with values and ethics, working for doing your PBS work with a company that is behavior science led and ethics bound, especially if that's what your education matches. So hopefully you can get a supervisor who's a CBA or BCBA, and then they're also just your PBS supervisor. So they're kind of, again, the same experience can count for all three things. So you have the same supervisor doing those. Yes, you can find, there are a lot of BCBA, CBA supervisors who work for companies to do the PBS side of things. That being said, there's also a lot of PBS companies who aren't as like behavior analytic education, ABA focused. So that might be where you have to look at like an external supervisor to meet the CBA requirements. But ideally, to save you money and time, it's all the same person, and they can also help connect those dots of like, you studied this in the master's and this is how it applies to PBS in the real world.
Because I guess that's the difference, isn't it, is really the cost and the consistency. If you can find a company that uses behavioural science and does have BCBA and CBA supervisors, then, they're usually doing that for you as part of your employment. So you're not paying out of pocket. Otherwise, you will be paying out of pocket for external supervisors. But, yeah. Can a BCBA who is not registered with the NDS sign off on PBS registration?
I don't believe so. So I think that's sitting where you have to be proficient or above proficient advanced or specialist to sign off on like a core practitioner entry level, and the entry level has to be with a company. So they're not interchangeable in that way, I suppose, if that kind of helps answer a broad question there. I can see if it'll let me unmute and things. Let me play with the settings. Sorry, Katie. I'm not sure in a webinar how to do it. Let's see. I wonder if I can just unmute you. trying to find it. Sorry, guys. I'll play 2 more seconds. Otherwise, we might just have to use the chat. Oh, here we go. I think I can do it, at least for Katie. If anyone else wants to, I can turn on their camera and mic. Did that work for you?
Yeah, no, that worked perfectly. Sorry. Yeah, trying to explain my question a little bit earlier was in the masters in like the first week, we were told that in order to get your required hours to become, well, for me, it would be a CBA. I would need to have 1,500 hours of supervised BCAB or CBA supervision. And so just talking about that PBS kind of entry, how to get into that, I just wanted to confirm that ideally, because I'm currently in talks with like a company that's like, okay, we've got supervisors, but what supervisor do you want? And I specify that, okay, I really want a BCAB so that I can kind of do 2 birds, 1 stone really, and do PBS and CBA at the same time so that I don't have to do like 3 years worth of hours. I could just do like a year and a half kind of thing. I just wanted like confirmation. And then my other thing as well is this particular company, they want to know what requirements their BCAB needs to follow. They said in terms of format and delivery, what's required.
Yeah. So yes, for the first answer, essentially when you go in with the company and they endorse you as the entry-level practitioner. During that year that you're working and getting supervision as that core practitioner, you can also then, yes, if you're with the BCBA or CBA, they can help you working towards those 1,500 hours. So yes, I think your understanding of that's correct. For the second part, you could send them the websites, I suppose, of like, here's the requirements to be a CBA and the CBA supervision guide. I think there is a resource on the ABA Australia website around the expectations for supervision. So it walks through qualifications that they're either BCBA, a CBA. I think they have some other options. And also like what that contact looks like. So being like, I believe it still is like 5% of supervised hours, and what that looks like. So they can hopefully do that. I would say if there are supervisors in the company who are BCBAs or CBAs, they should be across those requirements to help you. That's kind of a whole lot of the part of supervision as well, is that these people are helping guide you, that you don't have to have it all on your own, if that makes sense. Does that answer it a bit?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I kind of went back to them with that kind of thing, saying, look, I'm having a really hard problem. They're like, no, not a problem. We'll just let us know when you find out. And I was like, okay, cool, guys. All right.
It's hard out there. And this is where we can chat a little bit about it around when, you're working for a company that doesn't have the same education or leadership background in behavior analysis, where sometimes there can be some disconnect and some give and take on what that looks like. Have I missed any other questions in the chat, Tracey? I know you're answering if there's anything we need to chat through.
Yeah, I've answered a couple. So Irene is saying that she met up with a behaviour support company earlier and asked if we have any Monash-sponsored work placements. That's not something that Monash offers at the moment, is it? But I'm thinking if I can complete any supervision as a CBA at his company. Not sure what's the next move. There is no work placements at the moment at Monash. The only universities I'm aware of that have work placements aren't in behavioural science. They're more a PBS degree that have work placements. I'm not sure how they work. And I think that the other question was around a little more about approaching a company without any experience has been a roadblock, and they've not seen anything online for entry level positions. I think that there's a few options with that. I think that we need to get really good about explaining what we know. If you've studied behavioural science, it's a real depth of knowledge and skills that you will come to that company with. And I think that writing a cover letter and just really explaining all the things that you've learned. You can put your scores in there if you want to kind of show how dedicated you were, but really kind of using that against, as Rachel did before, around some of the things that you will learn in your degree compared to what's included in the capability framework. I think explaining some of those things in a cover letter could be really valuable and help. I'm not sure, Irene, if I answered your question very well or not, or if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that one is a bit like, there are BCBA and CBA opportunities outside of PBS, so you can sometimes look at the early intervention.
Sure.
I think given the context, those are becoming the NDIS context and funding. We're seeing less and less of those, unfortunately. Unfortunately for so many different reasons, but it does kind of give less opportunity for that. So there could be an option that, yeah, you can get CBA experience without PBS experience. So they are all separate, but they might overlap if you want them to as well. And I guess also just looking for those core level positions. So they might not call it entry level. Again, there's not a ton of standardization across the industry, so each company will have different titles that mean different things. So looking for core. I will say that the NDIS has gotten much faster at approving these entry level pathways. So as quick as like 4 weeks or faster.
Yeah.
Which should be reassuring, because I think that used to be the barrier for companies as well.
It was, yeah. I think it would take anything up to 3 or 4 months to get a response back from the commission. So it was tricky for employers to employ you, and then you're not able to work until your registration comes through. So it was a real gap, whereas that barrier really has been removed now. And I would encourage everyone to, if you see positions for core, to apply, put a really good cover letter, and really explain all the skills and the attributes that you come to the work with, knowing that it's a pretty easy process for them to support you through that, the new entry pathway.
Yeah. And then I guess that kind of, we can segue back to this as we answer some questions, what information you provide then. So there's 4 pieces that go with this entry level application. Really 2 of them are what you do, and then 2 should be provided by your employer. If they're not provided by your employer, they don't know, might be a little bit of an orange flag of like, is this company going to be able to support me in the way that I need to, being new to the role? So what you need to do is your documentation of experience and qualification. So your resume or CV. You probably have this when you applied for the job anyway, but as Tracey said, really talk up what your experience is and what that looks like. And then you'll do that declaration form. So it's just a couple of tick boxes that you'll do. Then your employer will give you a professional development plan. So they're going to say, this is how we're going to teach you everything, and a supervision agreement. So being like, this is what that supervision experience and that partnership looks like. Again, a big piece of the entry-level pathway is that partnership between the company and you as the employee and the practitioner to provide that for you. Lovely. I think I'll keep moving on, but we'll keep answering questions. And we might be able to circle back, I think, with some of it. We have some tips and tricks coming up. So I just want to summarize this bit for people as well, because I think this is the biggest question, is once you have been suitable for a year and you've been practicing, you'll have to put together a portfolio of evidence that you're going to have to do a self-assessment, being like, I think I'm proficient in these areas, I'm core in this, I need support in this area. And then your supervisor signs that off. For one of you asking if there's an alternative way other than the core, there is a self-assessment process where you can put together a portfolio of evidence, self-assess and be like, I think I'm a core practitioner, and there are external supervisors who can sign that off. This takes a lot longer to be signed off by the NDIS, and you have to have a lot more evidence there. So I wouldn't recommend it. I would really highly recommend the entry-level pathway if you haven't worked in the space. But I suppose it is an option that you could look at as well, which would just be the self-assessment pathway rather than the entry-level or alternative pathway. Some tips to develop a portfolio, which again just might be helpful after you start work, of just things to do. I often have the entry-level practitioners I'm supporting do this as we go along. So it's not 12 months into the job, you get a letter and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I put together? It's really along the way. Really putting together de-identified documents that outline each of the capability framework things that you've met, and just trying to keep track of what that looks like. A tip for this is really treat this like your registration, because it is. So hold on to it the way you would your BCBA hours or your CBA hours if you move companies, which is why it's important to de-identify documents, that this is your professional experience. For those of you who I think kind of have a psych background, you might be more familiar with like Opera, where you put together case studies and do submissions in that way, and that's your personal registration. Your NDIS registration should be treated the same way. Again, self-assessment, we're just going to go quickly through just because a lot of you guys won't be at this stage yet, and you should be able to do it with your supervisor once you start. But an important piece to know is that you don't have to have everything met to be at a level. So let's say you've been practicing for a year and you think you're ready to be proficient, but maybe there's a couple areas that you're still learning. You can be endorsed at a level with still being like developing certain capabilities. So you can have certain things you've met, certain things you're developing, and then areas that you haven't. So kind of is a little bit of a Likert scale in that way. This is what the self-assessment tool looks like. It literally goes through each of those domains and being like, okay, have you been able to evaluate the risks posed by the behavior to a person or other? Has your caseload and your supervision experience? Yep, you've met that. You know how to do that. Oh, maybe not. I've maybe started, but I don't feel super confident. You're developing, or actually, no, I have no idea what that is. And you go through and self-assess in this way. You put together evidence, so being like, this is how I know that, or here's my interim behavior support plan that shows I know how to meet the capabilities for the interim response. And then your supervisor signs that off. There's different types of evidence. So these are here on the slide and they'll be in the recording again as well. So just different types of supervision evidence, actual documents and work and things like that. Again, a lot of you won't be at the stage for self-assessment, so don't stress too much about this part. And then you're signed off by your supervisor. Any questions on the self-assessment part before we jump into preparing for the role, which I think might help answer some of the questions that have been in the chat and things, because I think that's the practical bit that people need. Cool. And Tracey, I know you're way across the questions, so jump in with any of that. Yeah, maybe we start with the questions before we get into this, I suppose. What's happening there?
Some people just asking around if they need to take, they're an RBT, part of their CBA, and I was just explaining more study, unfortunately. And then some questions around putting together a bit of a cover letter, and I just kind of reiterated that, looking at the areas of study against the PBS capability framework and saying something succinctly would help. Rabia, so for self-assessment version of PBS registration, you already need to have evidence of supervision. Yeah, so the self-assessment, you still need to be employed by so you'd be employed by a PBS registered provider company doing PBS, and then you're putting your portfolio of evidence together in that first 12 months that you're working as a practitioner. And yes, you would have a supervisor. You need a supervisor to sign you off.
I know sometimes you can see different people, especially in Facebook groups and stuff, taking different pathways and trying to find loopholes for this. I really, really recommend against it, just to protect yourselves. Again, protect your ethics and your integrity in that way. And also, as entry level, you are owed these things through the process. Like, that's why there is a provider and they have to meet these registration requirements. It's not a favor someone's doing to you. It's a condition of their registration and what they're expected to do. So you're not an inconvenience for asking those questions. You're not inconvenienced for asking about supervision. Again, they're not doing extra favors for you. It's part of their responsibilities as well. For things, if you are kind of looking of like, okay, how do I actually get into this then? Some other things you can do in the meantime alongside your study is, one, learn about restrictive practices. You can add this to your resume and such. I think different states, I know here in Victoria, the Victorian Senior Practitioner has a wealth of resources and videos and trainings on their website. Get to know that and add that to your CV. You can even start putting together a portfolio and being like, I don't have practical experience with this yet, but I've really wrapped my head around what that process looks like. Also, go ahead and get a head start on your compliance checks where you can. So there are like state specific, like working with children's, background checks or worker screening. Just be prepared to have that information. You don't necessarily have to get these yet, but if you know you need certified documents or things like that, getting a head start on that can help prevent some delays. And then again, just attend different professional developments and trainings and supervisions. There's lots of different options out there for what that looks like. I'd also really recommend, especially if you're really new to the disability space, get experience working with people with disability, meet people with lived experience out there. I think some of the best behavior support practitioners have been support workers previously. They really understand the role and the context and what's happening out there. Similar though, maybe it's working in education and teaching or childcare, early intervention. So maybe you have started that more kind of traditional ABA background or aged care. If you're really like, I need some type of experience, it doesn't have to be that full clinical yet. Get on the ground, meet people, learn from lived experience. There's so much value to that. And I think that, again, that can really just help you be an even better practitioner. When you walk in, you're like, I've been a support worker, and you're training a support worker team. It's so much easier to understand what's expected and to build those relationships than if you've never kind of been on the ground with people. There are some training options out there as well to kind of supplement things. Tracey has PBS Together, which I just highly recommend. There's free webinars that you can sign up for. There's boot camps and other paid classes. I don't know, Tracey, if you want to expand on any of that, but if you're wanting to get into PBS, but you're not quite there yet and you feel like you need more experience, this is a great option.
Yeah, so with the PBS bootcamp, it goes for over 9 months. So there's 650 learning objectives. It goes through all the practical areas that you'll need, the skills that you need to do the job really well. And you get like a group supervision, live classes and recorded courses. And there's some free webinars every month. So if you want to just sign up for our newsletter, then you'll know what's on offer and what's coming up.
And these are things, especially, you know, maybe you're a student and you're not quite ready for full-time work yet. This might really supplement your learning experience too, to be like, I'm really dedicated. This is where I've learned. I'm ready to jump in this role. I just need a company to take a chance on me. I think it would well prepare you. This might, again, tie back to some of the other questions people were asking around considerations for finding a provider. I love when people ask these questions in interviews. I recommend you ask these when you're chatting with people's HR. It doesn't even have to be fully at the interview stage or even after an interview of what that looks like. One, I think, ask what billable hour expectations are and what the incentives are for meeting this. Again, understanding that you're new to the role. If your billable expectations are too high, that's going to mean you have too big of a client caseload. So it might be enticing sometimes that it might seem like it's more money, but also, again, like Tracey was saying earlier, protecting yourself from burnout and making sure that you're being supported to learn the role is important. There's a lot of variety out there for what this looks like from companies. So you'll have to figure out what kind of works for you. I'm not going to say that's too high or that's too low, but just ask what that question is. And also then you know what that expectation is when you're starting.
And I think that the average, from what I can see from most companies, is about 5 billable hours a day, but entry level may be lower for some companies as well. So it's worth checking out.
Similar, you can ask what quality improvement processes they have in place. This might just get a little bit a question around like what their clinical governance is. So are they always trying to improve processes and give people more trainings and give better and better clinical services? Is that something that's important value to the company? Next really important, I think, is asking what's your supervision structure? How do you encourage professional development? What does this look like? Are there group supervision opportunities? Is it individual? How's that time factored in to the week? A really, really good green flag for a company is that they get excited about this question. They're like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about our supervisors and our supervision that we offer in our trainings and things. And that ties in nicely to what's your training and onboarding process. So it's a very fair question, especially if you're coming in entry level. How are you going to teach me this role? How am I going to learn what to do and what's expected? Other questions to kind of ask around supervision, which I think a couple of you were asking in the chat. Again, ask what their supervision policy and structure looks like. Ask how often you would expect to have supervision with the role they're offering you. So this might be, you know, the way we kind of do it is like, this is what we expect entry-level practitioners to receive. This is what we expect kind of more experience. They might be meeting weekly, and then maybe people who are working more independently might be at least fortnightly catch-ups. Again, if you're looking at that BCBA or CBA supervision, ask that at the beginning. Be like, can you offer me BCBA, or in most of your cases, can you offer me CBA supervision? Ask how they train and support their supervisors. So is it just someone who's been doing it? Do they offer any extra training to learn how to supervise you? An important question might be as well as how many BCBA or CBA supervisors do you have? And how many practitioners are working towards that qualification? This might just help. I've seen some sad situations where people take a role and they've been promised CBA supervision, but there's only one supervisor at the company, and then that person goes on leave or moves jobs, and all of a sudden there's no supervisor in the company. And you're like, but that's why I chose this role over the other one, was for that. So you want to make sure there's options, or at least know what risks you're taking with that, and understanding what their caseload looks like and how that is. And again, also ask, are there other people working towards CBA certifications? And they're probably really across all the requirements and how to support you. Or is no one else doing that in the company, so you're really having to provide a lot of that education? Doesn't mean you need to choose one way or the other. I'm not saying they have to answer all yes to this, but more just so you have informed information for you to make decisions as you go through that hiring process. I also think, especially for those of you who have studied ABA and the master's and you're passionate about that space, and especially that ethical side of things, I think it's a fair question to ask what the company's view on behavior science or applied behavior analysis is, and also ask how they navigate ethical decision making. I would love if someone asked me this in an interview to get the chance to talk about where our values lie with that. So it shouldn't be a confrontational question, but just some thoughts for when they ask you at the end of the interview on if you have any questions. Asking how they navigate ethical decision making, I think, would be a fair question. Anything else you might ask Tracey if you were in their shoes?
Sorry, I was just trying to respond to some chats there. I think it is important because you've done all that work. Those of you that have studied behavioural science, it's a big piece of work to study. It takes a lot of time and effort and passion to kind of get to the end. And it is really important that the way you view behaviour is the same way that they view behaviour. Like, it is kind of that foundation, and you want to make sure that you find a company that matches your values. And part of your values is about how you see the world and what you've learnt about behavioural science. So it is important. You'll thrive and do much better if you find a company that has the same values and the same view as you do.
That's so eloquently said. We need to quote that somehow, Tracey. That was beautiful. I think the values piece, I just fully echo that. I think that's one of the biggest reasons I think that can lead to burnout as well. If you're really passionate and this is something really integral to who you are and what's important, and you're working in a place that doesn't support that, you can't change that system. You're going to be, like a fish swimming upstream, and it's just going to exhaust you in that way. So ask it from the beginning. And people should be excited about having shared values with you. It should be an exciting conversation. Lovely. Any other questions? I know things have been happening in the chat. See if there was any we didn't answer. We do have some resources that it all just links back mostly to the NDIS and then ABA website. But thank you guys for joining us on the Monday morning. We'll stay on for a second to answer a few more questions. If anyone has any. And just let me know if you need me to unmute you or something. I should be able to do that as well.
And Kameleon Group is one of the companies that do take on level ones. We don't take on many level ones, like just a few a year, but it is something to consider. And you definitely can send your CV through to Kameleon Group, which is I Belong. I'll put it in the chat.
Yep.
The email address, so something to consider. And yep.
I was just seeing the next question as well. How much do you expect to bill starting level? How much are you supposed to ask for? I'm not sure if you're asking there around salary or if you're asking like what work you're meant to do. So the billing is set by the NDIS as far as what your hourly rate is, and that's the same across the board for all practitioners. It changes fairly regularly, or kind of once a year we kind of see that change. So your company will know what that looks like. Salary can be quite variable. I would recommend, obviously, salary and money is important, but I would consider alongside these other considerations of like, are they offering me more supervision? Is my expectation of how many billables I'm doing per week match that, and find the right balance of that? Tracey, I'm not sure if you know other salary expectations for entry level. I think there's just such big variety out there.
There is a big variety, and it probably goes from 70,000 to 80 or 90,000. But you really want to look for a company that's going to invest in you, and sometimes that may not be the top kind of salary rate because they're investing in you, and that's what you want if you want to grow and stay in the industry and not burn out. Then that's what you kind of need to do. Yeah. I'm just trying to go there. Charles, telehealth, yes, absolutely. You can do online supervision. I think most people end up getting online supervision a lot of the time because face-to-face supervision is pretty tricky in Australia. So absolutely, you can do that. Salary, hourly rate, yeah, it's not so much to be employed. I would really recommend that you don't try and find contractor positions because basically you're working on your own, and it can look good because they can give you like a per hour rate, but then you're not being paid for any administration work, you're not being paid for any learning, you're not being paid for any supervision time, anything like that, where you would be paid as an employer, as an employee. So just be mindful of that. Same thing, hourly rates, the same thing. It's not so much an hourly rate, but an annual salary. You should be looking for a paid role in being employed, so then you get good supervision and support, and somewhere that has some good clinical governance structures to support you and keep you safe, because it is can be a tricky space to work.
It also helps with employment. They will help you with clients more so and make sure they fit your skill set. Sometimes with contractor arrangements, I've seen people being like, I can't get clients, but if you're core and new and that's kind of how you're advertised, people, it might be harder to get it in that way. So totally. You might miss out on work in that way as well. But I agree. I always recommend employment to start.
Yeah. And Charles, quick search, there's one CBA in South Australia. Yeah. Also look for the BCBAs, Charles, because there's a lot of BCBAs who aren't CBAs, and so you can get supervision by either. You might get a broader amount of people on the BCBA list, but check everything. They don't have to be where you live. Ellen, can you please clarify what you mentioned about NDIS set? I'm not sure.
I think that might have been when I was saying the NDIS sets the rate that we charge clients for the work. So the hourly rate that the company bills for is set across the country. It used to be varied by state. It's actually just the same across the board. There are some considerations for like remote or rural work. But I think it's like $232.99 right now, but it does change a little bit. But you wouldn't have to know that as much. You'd be at an employer and they'll be doing the invoicing and setting that up, and knowing that. You just probably need to ask how many billable hours you'd be doing.
That's right. There are one or two companies that have allied health assistants. So you wouldn't be a PBS practitioner, but an assistant. And then they do charge a lower amount, but then you would be earning a much lower amount as well for that. So again, we really recommend that you try and find a company that has a good clinical governance structure, good supervision. You understand what your billable hours are. You understand what the expectations are for the role. You're going to be supported to learn and be employed by a PBS specialist company, registered company, and then learn that way and get them to support your new entry pathway that it's called. So just to kind of clear up some confusion as well. So there's the new entry pathway, because I know it's really confusing, and then there's the self-assessment for core. You have to already be employed to go for the self-assessment. So you go in as a new entry level pathway, you work for a year, you've got a year to get your portfolio of evidence, and then you fill out a self-assessment to be core or above. Because it is really, NDIS don't make anything easy. It's really tricky.
I don't. Yeah, Katie, I'll try and find the link for the BACB. I think they have it through the BACB website, supervisors.
Yeah.
There are so many national PBS companies, so it also might be, because I know Hobart can't be small. Down there, you might be like, oh, there are 3 BCBAs and they're not taking on supervisees. But you might be able to find a company that your supervisors in Victoria or Queensland, and they can provide that CBS and PBS experience. It's just trying to find the link for supervisors, though.
Yeah, no, me too. It's on the website. My internet is slow. Oh, yeah, I've got it. I'll put it in.
Beautiful. And yeah,
That's
Katie,
the
I see
link.
again.
That's a link if you want to find a BCBA supervisor. And you can see, you can go through a general search, you can just click active and then the country, and it'll come up with all of them. I'm not actually sure how many there are in Australia now.
And it is nice because BCBAs can provide your CBA supervision. CBA,
That's right.
or just a CBA, can't provide your BCBA supervision.
Yeah.
So that's where we said, if you're looking for CBA supervision, extend your search to the BACB. They're allowed to supervise you for your CBA experience, if that makes sense.
And I'll just have a look to see.
There are some Facebook groups and stuff too. You can possibly ask for the external supervision and such like that, and people are quite active in responding in that way. But just do your background research on if their experience matches yours. And
make sure that make sure that if you find a supervisor that's not with a company that you work for, or you just want some supervision to for your journey, for your learning journey, check them out, see what their experience is, what qualifications they have, how long they've practiced for, the area of practice. Ask some questions about all of that, because you want to be able to make sure that if you're going to pay for external supervision, you want someone who is going to really focus on your learning.
Lovely. Thank you, everyone, for... Oh, sorry, yeah, Katie, I'll let you... You should be able to unmute again, I think.
Sorry. I was just going through that supervision thing that you just put in. I'm not too sure what parts do I need to click, because I've just gone through all of, I went through Tasmania and Queensland, just as a random one, and it's come up that there are no supervisors. So I was just wondering, is that website, is there a particular knack I need to have?
Unless it's not functioning.
Yeah.
When I do it, I've got, I just press Queensland. I've got, oh no, there's a lot. 58. Okay. There's 58. So you need to put Australia in the company. Then make sure you click certification type. So BCBAs, for example.
Yeah.
Then click active for status.
Just active, yeah.
Yeah. Then click Australia for country, and then whatever state, Queensland, New South Wales, whatever state, and then press search. And I got 58 for Queensland.
Oh, okay. Is there any chance? Yeah, it's still coming up with 0 for me.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I don't know what's happening. Okay, no, that's all right.
Yeah.
I'll have a play around. Thank you.
But if you go to the BACB website and find it, but yeah, I just did it and got 58 for Queensland. So there is, you can't do Australia-wide. You need to put in a state, but there's probably, I don't know, BCBAs. What do you think maybe 300 or 400 maybe.
I think so. It'd be a few
Something
hundred.
like that.
Yeah.
And then there might be, 150 supervisors, or I don't know how many supervisors there are. You have to go through and find the supervisors, but they will be there.
Yeah.
So sorry, your link doesn't work for you. I'm not sure. Why. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys
Thanks
for joining
so much.
us.
Thanks for all the great questions.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll see you around the trap soon. It's a small world, isn't it, Rachel? We all kind of know each other.
Yeah.
So really good, best of luck finding what you need to look for. And you can go back to the Kameleon group website in a few days. It'll take us a few days to put the video up, and then you'll see the video up there, the recording, so you can watch it again, because some of the information is super confusing. And you can kind of have some time to get your head around it. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care of your lovely selves. See you. Bye-bye.